I always thought that the moment your life falls apart would be dramatic. Thunder cracking in the background, rain pouring down in sheets, the universe giving you some kind of cosmic warning. But that's not how it happened for me. My world shattered on a perfect spring day, with sunshine streaming through our bedroom window and birds singing outside like nothing was wrong. Our 5th anniversary. I'd taken the day off work to prepare everything. 5 years of marriage to David deserved something special. We'd met in college, dated for 3 years, and then tied the knot in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. He was my everything, handsome, intelligent, ambitious, and I thought devoted. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect anniversary surprise. David thought I was working late, but I'd secretly arranged to leave early to prepare a romantic dinner at home. I'd even splurged on his favorite wine, a ridiculously expensive Bordeaux that we normally reserved for major celebrations. This qualified. Our apartment was modestly sized but perfect for us, a 1-bedroom in a renovated brownstone with hardwood floors and large windows that bathed the rooms in natural light. We'd decorated it together, combining his minimalist tendencies with my love of color and texture. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and I'd spent the morning turning it into a romantic haven with candles, flowers, and soft music. The table was set with our wedding china, rarely used but perfect for tonight. I had just put the finishing touches on the table setting when I realized I'd forgotten to iron his favorite shirt for him to wear tonight. David always appreciated little gestures like that. I headed to our bedroom, humming softly to myself, mentally rehearsing the anniversary speech I'd prepared. 5 years of memories, of building a life together, of planning our future. We'd been talking about starting a family soon, maybe looking for a larger place with a yard. Everything was falling into place exactly as we'd planned. That's when I saw it, his laptop open on the bed. David rarely left his computer unlocked. He was paranoid about security given his work in finance. But there it was, the screen dimly lit, an email account open. I wasn't the snooping type. I trusted David completely. But something caught my eye as I reached to close the laptop, a name I didn't recognize. Melissa. And beneath it, words that didn't make sense in my happy little world. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same hotel as last time. My hand froze above the keyboard. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe it was spam. Maybe it was for someone else with the same name. The possibilities raced through my mind as I stood there, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. I shouldn't look. I shouldn't invade his privacy. But my finger was already moving, scrolling up to see the rest of the conversation. And with each message that appeared on the screen, another piece of my heart crumbled away. Last night was amazing. I miss your touch already. When can you get away from her again? Her. Me. I was her. The timestamps matched up perfectly with nights when David said he was working late or having drinks with colleagues. Nights when I'd waited up for him, maybe sending a text to say I missed him, or fallen asleep alone wondering when he'd be home. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the edge of the bed, the laptop balanced precariously on my knees. I scrolled further back, each message making it harder to breathe. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was an affair. Months of lies, of deception, of betrayal while I remained blissfully, stupidly unaware. There were pictures. I wish I hadn't seen them, but I couldn't stop scrolling, couldn't stop inflicting this pain on myself. Melissa was beautiful, younger than me, with long blonde hair and the kind of effortless beauty that I'd always envied. In one photo, I could see David's watch on her nightstand, the watch I'd given him for his birthday last year. My mind kept trying to deny what my eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. Not David. Not us. We were happy. We were planning our future. Just last week we'd stayed up late talking about baby names, for God's sake. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, the evidence of my husband's betrayal illuminated on the screen before me. Minutes? Hours? Time seemed to stretch and contract all at once. The carefully prepared anniversary dinner in the next room now seemed like a cruel joke. The candles would be burning down, the food getting cold, just like our marriage. When my phone buzzed with a text, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was David. Leaving work soon. Can't wait to see you. Happy anniversary, babe. That heart emoji. That goddamn heart emoji. The casual declaration of love while he was probably sitting beside his other lover, maybe even in her bed, sending me this lie. I looked at our wedding photo on the nightstand. We looked so happy, so in love, so certain of our future together. Had it all been a lie? Had he been cheating all along? Or was I just not enough anymore? The pain in my chest was physical, as if someone had reached in and was squeezing my heart, determined to crush it completely. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't process that the life I thought I had was nothing but an elaborate facade. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The initial shock gave way to a cold, clear rage that I had never felt before. It wasn't hot or passionate, it was icy and calculating. I looked at the bedroom that we shared, at the life we had built, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't be the woman who was cheated on and forgave. I wouldn't be the understanding wife who worked through this rough patch. I wouldn't compete with Melissa or any other woman for my husband's attention. No, I deserved better. And David deserved exactly what I was about to give him. With trembling fingers, I took screenshots of the emails and sent them to myself. Evidence. I would need evidence. Then I carefully closed the laptop, placing it exactly as I had found it. The perfect wife, not disturbing her husband's things. I walked back to the dining room on unsteady legs. The romantic table setting mocked me, the candles, the flowers, the wine breathing in the crystal decanter. I blew out the candles one by one, watching the smoke curl and disappear like my dreams for our future. The food went into containers, then into the refrigerator. Evidence of my love and effort hidden away. I changed out of the new dress I'd bought specially for tonight, the one that was his favorite color, and put on jeans and a t-shirt. Armor of a sort. Then I sat at the kitchen counter and waited, turning my wedding ring around and around on my finger, feeling the weight of it, the promise it represented. A promise he had broken over and over again. The sound of his key in the lock made my stomach clench. I could do this. I had to do this. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, I would be the perfect wife one last time. I would serve him the anniversary dinner I'd prepared. I would smile and laugh and pretend that my world hadn't just imploded. I would sleep beside him, the man who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. And tomorrow, I would begin planning exactly how to dismantle the life of David Anderson, the man who thought he could have everything, a devoted wife at home and a passionate lover on the side. The man who believed he was smart enough, charming enough to maintain his double life indefinitely. He had no idea what was coming. "Happy anniversary, babe!" David's voice rang out as he entered the apartment, the sound of his keys dropping into the bowl by the door as familiar as my own heartbeat. He appeared in the doorway, handsome in his tailored suit, his dark hair slightly tousled, a bouquet of roses in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. The perfect husband returning home to his loving wife. I pasted on a smile, amazed at how easily it came. "Happy anniversary," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. He crossed the room and kissed me, his lips on mine sending revulsion through my body rather than the usual warmth. Had he kissed her today too? Had he already rehearsed this performance with Melissa before coming home to me? "These are for you," he said, handing me the roses. "And this." He placed the small bag on the counter with a smile that once would have made my heart race. "Thank you," I said, taking the flowers. "They're beautiful." I buried my face in them, using the moment to compose myself. "Dinner's ready whenever you are. I made your favorite." "You're amazing," he said, loosening his tie. "Let me just freshen up. It's been a crazy day at work." Liar. The word screamed in my mind, but my face remained placid. "Take your time. I'll open the wine." As he disappeared into our bedroom, I wondered if he would check his laptop, if he would realize I'd seen his emails. But a few minutes later, he emerged in fresh clothes, relaxed and smiling, completely unaware that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. Throughout dinner, I played my part flawlessly. I asked about his day, nodded at appropriate moments, shared anecdotes about my own work. I even managed to laugh at his jokes, all while studying him like a specimen under glass. This stranger across from me, this man I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. "Remember our first date?" he asked, refilling my wine glass. "That terrible Italian restaurant where they burned the garlic bread?" I nodded, the memory now tainted. "And you spilled red wine all over your white shirt. But you still agreed to a second date," he said with that charming smile that had once made me weak at the knees. "I did, because I thought you were sincere, because I believed in us." "Best decision you ever made?" he said, raising his glass in a toast. I clinked my glass against his, wondering if he made the same toasts with Melissa. "To us?" I said, the words ashen in my mouth. After dinner, we moved to the couch with our wine. David handed me the gift bag with a smile. "Open it." Inside was a small velvet box. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, revealing a diamond pendant on a delicate silver chain. It was beautiful, tasteful, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. "David, it's lovely," I said, and this wasn't a lie. The necklace was perfect. It was everything else that was wrong. "Here, let me," he said, taking the necklace and moving behind me to fasten it around my neck. His fingers brushed my skin, and I suppressed a shudder. How many times had those same fingers traced patterns on Melissa's skin? "I love you," he murmured, kissing the back of my neck. 5 years, and I'm still the luckiest man alive. The words cut deeper than any knife. I turned to face him, searching his eyes for any sign of guilt, any indication that he knew what he was doing to me, to us. But all I saw was the same loving expression he'd always shown me. He was either the world's best actor, or he had compartmentalized so completely that he truly believed his own lies. "I have something for you too," I said, retrieving a package from the side table. Inside was a vintage watch I'd found at an antique store months ago, had restored and engraved with our wedding date. I'd been so excited to give it to him, imagining his face lighting up, picturing him wearing it for years to come, a constant reminder of our love. Now I wanted to snatch it back, to smash it against the wall, to destroy this symbol of a commitment that clearly meant nothing to him. But I handed it over with a smile, watching as he unwrapped it with boyish enthusiasm. "This is incredible," he said, turning the watch over in his hands, admiring the craftsmanship. "Exactly like the one my grandfather had." He read the engraving and looked up at me, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You remembered." "Of course I did," I said softly. "You only mentioned it once, but I knew how much it meant to you." He put the watch on immediately, adjusting the strap. "It's perfect. You're perfect." He leaned in to kiss me, and I forced myself to respond, to play the role of adoring wife while screaming inside. Later, in bed, he reached for me, his intentions clear. I couldn't do it. The thought of him touching me, of being intimate with him, knowing where he'd been, who he'd been with, it made me physically ill. "I'm sorry," I said, turning away. "Migraine. It just hit me." "Oh, babe, I'm sorry," he said, his concern seemingly genuine. He got up and returned with my medication and a glass of water. "Here, can I get you anything else? Ice pack? Tea?" I shook my head, swallowing the pills gratefully. They wouldn't help with the real pain, but at least they might let me escape into sleep for a few hours. Just need to sleep it off. "Okay. Love you." He kissed my forehead and settled beside me, his hand resting lightly on my hip. Once his breathing deepened into sleep, I carefully moved away from his touch and curled up on the very edge of the bed, as far from him as possible without falling off. Tears slid silently down my face and onto the pillow as I stared into the darkness, planning my next move. Morning came too quickly. I'd barely slept, cycling between rage, grief, and calculating revenge. By the time David's alarm went off, I had the beginnings of a plan forming in my mind. "Feeling better?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "A little," I lied, putting on the same mask I'd worn the night before. "You should get ready for work." "I'll make coffee." In the kitchen, I went through the motions of our normal morning routine while my mind worked frantically. I needed time. Time to figure out our finances, to find a new place to live, to set everything in motion. I couldn't confront him yet. Not until I was ready. David appeared, dressed for work, hair still damp from the shower. "You sure you're okay? You could take a sick day." "No, I'm fine." "Really? Go." "I know you have that big meeting." Another lie to add to the pile between us. He kissed me goodbye, promised to text me later, and was gone. The moment the door closed behind him, I collapsed against the counter, finally allowing the full weight of my emotions to crash over me. I gave myself exactly 10 minutes to fall apart completely. 10 minutes of sobbing, of cursing his name, of asking why and how and when it had all gone wrong. Then I straightened up, dried my eyes, and got to work. First, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. How long had the affair been going on? Was Melissa the only one? Were there other secrets I didn't know about? I went to our home office and booted up my laptop, logging into our shared accounts one by one. Credit card statements, phone bills, email accounts we'd set up years ago but rarely used. I combed through everything, looking for patterns, for clues, for anything that would give me a clearer picture of the man I'd married. The credit card statements were the most revealing. Regular charges at a hotel downtown, dinner at restaurants I'd never been to, gifts from jewelry stores that had never made their way to me. Small withdrawals of cash, probably to cover his tracks for other expenses. The affair with Melissa had been going on for at least 8 months, possibly longer, but there were other charges, other patterns that suggested she might not be the first. A different hotel, different restaurants a year before Melissa appeared in the picture. A weekend trip to Chicago when he'd told me he was at a conference in Boston. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but I forced myself to catalog everything methodically, building a comprehensive picture of David's betrayal. Knowledge was power, and I needed every advantage I could get. Next, I reviewed our finances. We had a joint checking account for household expenses, joint savings for our future home, and individual accounts for personal spending. But I discovered David had opened another account that I knew nothing about. He'd been siphoning money into it for months, not huge amounts, but enough to build a substantial balance. An escape fund? Or just a way to finance his affairs without raising red flags? I made copies of everything, storing the information securely in a new email account he knew nothing about. Then I checked our legal documents, the mortgage on our apartment, our wills, insurance policies. Everything looked normal on the surface, but I wasn't taking any chances. I made copies of these too. By the time I finished this initial investigation, it was mid-afternoon. David had texted twice, checking on my migraine, playing the role of concerned husband. I responded just enough to keep him from worrying, to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I was no longer the trusting wife living in blissful ignorance. I was a woman with a mission, and that mission was to extract myself from this marriage on my terms, not his. I spent the rest of the day researching divorce attorneys, learning about New York State divorce laws, and calculating exactly what I would need financially to start over. I wasn't after his money. I had my own career, my own income. But I wouldn't be left destitute either. When David came home that evening, I was ready with dinner and conversation, the perfect picture of domestic tranquility. If he noticed the redness around my eyes or the slight tremor in my hands, he didn't mention it. We ate, we talked, we watched TV. Normal. Everything normal, while I silently counted down the days until I would shatter his comfortable world. The next week passed in a blur of secret preparations and painful pretense. By day, I met with attorneys, viewed apartments, and set up new bank accounts in my name only. By night, I played the role of loving wife, maintaining the facade of our marriage while systematically preparing to destroy it. I chose an apartment across town, paid the security deposit from my personal savings, and arranged for movers to come when I gave the word. I consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving infidelity, providing her with the evidence I'd gathered. She was confident we had a strong case that would favor me in the settlement. Through it all, David remained completely oblivious. He continued his normal routine, working late, or so he claimed, coming home to me, occasionally texting during the day to check in. I monitored his emails when I could, watching as he coordinated meetings with Melissa, crafting elaborate lies to tell me about where he was going and who he was with. Each new lie hardened my resolve. This wasn't just about the affair, it was about the systematic deception, the elaborate double life he'd constructed, the complete disregard for our vows and our shared future. I wrestled with when and how to confront him. A public scene? Too messy. A simple note left on the kitchen counter? Too impersonal after 5 years of marriage. I wanted him to feel the full impact of what he'd done, to understand exactly what he was losing. The answer came to me on a Tuesday morning as I was sorting through some old photos for a project I'd been working on before my world imploded. Pictures of us throughout our relationship, dating, engagement, wedding, honeymoon, holidays, random moments of happiness captured forever on paper. A visual record of what I thought was a loving, faithful partnership. That's when I knew exactly how I would do it. I spent the next few days selecting photos, gathering mementos from our relationship, ticket stubs from concerts, notes he'd written me, the dried boutonniere from our wedding, the hospital bracelet from when I'd had my appendix out and he'd stayed by my side for 3 days straight. Tangible reminders of the life we'd shared, the promises we'd made, the future we'd planned. I found a nice box, ironically, one he'd given me for Christmas one year, and carefully arranged everything inside. On top, I placed the screenshots of his emails with Melissa, the credit card statements showing his hotel charges, and the document from our lawyer outlining the divorce proceedings that were already in motion. Then I waited for the perfect moment. It came sooner than I expected. I have to go out of town this weekend. David announced over dinner on Thursday. Last-minute client emergency in Boston. I'll fly out Friday afternoon and be back Sunday night. Boston. The same lie he'd used before when he was actually in Chicago. I wondered where he was really going this time. Melissa? Or someone new? That's too bad, I said, feigning disappointment. I was hoping we could try that new restaurant on Saturday. Next weekend, he promised, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. We'll make a whole day of it. Brunch, maybe a museum, then dinner? I smiled and nodded, knowing there would be no next weekend, no future plans, no more lies. What time's your flight? I asked casually. 4:30? I'll head straight to the airport from work. Perfect. I had until Monday morning to execute my plan, move my essential belongings to the new apartment, and prepare for the final act of our marriage. Friday morning, David kissed me goodbye as usual, completely unaware that it was the last time he would see me as his wife. The moment the door closed behind him, I sprang into action. The movers arrived at 9, efficiently loading the items I'd designated as mine. My clothes, personal belongings, the furniture we'd agreed was primarily mine. When we'd moved in together, I left his things untouched, along with the shared items that I had no particular attachment to. By early afternoon, my essential belongings were safely installed in my new apartment. It was smaller than our shared home, but it was mine alone, a clean slate from which to rebuild my life. I returned to the old apartment to finish the most important part of my plan. First, I packed a box with the last of David's personal items from the bathroom and bedroom, his toiletries, the clothes hanging in the closet, the books on his nightstand. On top, I placed the carefully curated memory box I'd prepared, with all the evidence of his betrayal. Then I called a locksmith. I'd already checked our lease agreement. Both our names were on it, but there was nothing prohibiting changing the locks as long as the property wasn't damaged. The locksmith arrived promptly, replacing the locks on both the main door and the security door. I paid him in cash and pocketed the new keys, all of them. With the apartment secured, I placed David's box of belongings beside the door where he couldn't miss it. On top, I left a single item, my wedding ring, and a note with just 3 words. I know everything. Simple. Director. Devastating. I took one last look around the apartment that had been our home, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Grief for what I'd lost, anger at his betrayal, but also a strange sense of liberation. This chapter of my life was ending, but a new one was beginning. One where I wouldn't be lied to, cheated on, or taken for granted. I closed the door behind me, hearing the new lock engage with a satisfying click. As I walked away, I texted David one last time from my old phone, "Have a safe trip. We'll talk when you get back." Then I turned that phone off permanently, slipped it into a trash can on the corner, and headed to my new home with my new phone, new keys, and new beginning. The weekend passed in a blur of unpacking, organizing, and alternating between moments of crushing grief and empowering resolve. I had prepared myself for his reaction, knowing that at some point he would discover he was locked out of our apartment with all his belongings boxed up beside the door. Saturday passed without any contact. Either he was maintaining his fiction of being in Boston, or he hadn't returned to the apartment yet. Sunday was quiet too, until late afternoon when my new phone began buzzing with calls from a number I didn't recognize. David, calling from a hotel perhaps, or a friend's phone. I let each call go to voicemail. There were texts too, increasingly frantic. "Where are you? Call me. What the hell is going on? Why are my things outside? I can't get into the apartment. Did you change the locks? Please call me. We need to talk about this. Whatever you think you know, it's not what it looks like." That last one made me laugh out loud. Not what it looks like. The oldest line in the cheater's handbook. More calls, more texts. I put my phone on silent and continued arranging my new living room, hanging art on the walls, creating a space that was entirely mine. Monday morning brought an email from my lawyer. David had contacted her, demanding to know what was happening. She had calmly informed him that I was filing for divorce on grounds of adultery, that all communication should go through her from now on, and that he would be receiving the formal papers within days. He didn't take it well, she wrote. Denied everything at first, then tried to minimize. Classic stages of being caught. Don't worry, I've seen it all before. Stay the course, keep your distance, and let me handle him. I felt a surge of gratitude for her professional detachment, her calm confidence in the face of his anger. This was why I had chosen her. She wouldn't be swayed by his charm or manipulated by his lies. The next few days were a test of my resolve. David escalated from denial to anger to pleading, trying every approach to get me to respond. He sent emails begging for a chance to explain, left voicemails alternating between apologetic and indignant, and even showed up at my workplace once, only to be turned away by security when I refused to see him. Through it all, I maintained my silence, letting my lawyer handle the necessary communications. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, ignoring the man I had loved for years as he desperately tried to salvage what he'd destroyed. There were moments of weakness when I nearly called him back, nearly gave in to the desire to hear his explanation, his apologies, his promises to change. But then I would remember the emails, the hotel charges, the calculated lies, and my resolve would harden again. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, it was months, possibly years, of deliberate deception. There was no coming back from that. A week after I'd changed the locks, my lawyer called with an update. "He's agreed to mediation rather than fighting this in court," she said. "Smart move on his part. The evidence is overwhelmingly against him, and a public trial would only hurt his reputation and career." "When?" I asked, surprised by how calm I felt. "Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. My office. You don't have to see him or speak to him directly if you don't want to." I can handle everything. I considered this. Part of me wanted to avoid seeing him altogether, to maintain the clean break I'd created. But another part needed closure, needed to look him in the eye one last time as we dismantled the life we'd built together. "I'll be there," I decided. "But I don't want to be alone with him." "Of course not," she assured me. "I'll be with you the entire time." The days leading up to the mediation were surprisingly peaceful. I focused on settling into my new apartment, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my marriage, and even started a yoga class I'd been meaning to try for years. Small steps toward reclaiming myself, toward building a life beyond the betrayal. The morning of the mediation, I dressed carefully in a sleek gray suit that projected confidence and composure. My lawyer had advised me to appear professional and detached, to show David that I was moving forward with or without his cooperation. As I applied my makeup, I studied my reflection in the mirror. There were new lines around my eyes, evidence of the tears and sleepless nights of the past few weeks. But there was also a new strength in my gaze, a determination that hadn't been there before. I wasn't just surviving this betrayal, I was transforming it into something powerful. My lawyer's office was in a sleek building downtown, all glass and steel and quiet efficiency. I arrived early, was escorted to a conference room, and given coffee while I waited. My lawyer joined me shortly, reviewing our strategy one last time. "Remember, you're in control here," she reminded me. "You have the evidence, you have the moral high ground, and you have me. Don't let him provoke you or manipulate you into concessions you'll regret later." I nodded, gripping my coffee cup a little too tightly as the door opened and David walked in, followed by his own lawyer. My breath caught at the sight of him. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his normally immaculate clothes slightly rumpled. For a moment, a treacherous part of my heart ached for him, wanted to comfort him as I had so many times before. Then I remembered why we were here, what he had done, how completely he had violated my trust, and that momentary weakness vanished. Our eyes met across the conference table, and I saw a flicker of hope in his gaze, quickly extinguished when I deliberately looked away, turning my attention to his lawyer instead. The meeting proceeded with clinical efficiency. Assets were discussed, terms negotiated, agreements made. David kept trying to catch my eye, to establish some connection, but I remained focused on the documents before me, responding only when directly addressed. Finally, as the meeting drew to a close, he broke protocol. "Can I just have 5 minutes alone with her?" he asked suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. "Please." 5 minutes. His lawyer looked uncomfortable. Mine immediately shook her head. "That's not happening. All communication goes through us." 5 minutes, he repeated, looking directly at me now. "After 5 years together, don't I deserve that much?" Did he deserve anything from me? The man who had lied to my face for months, who had shared his body and his heart with another woman while pretending to be devoted to me. The man who would still be living his double life if I hadn't discovered the truth? But curiosity won out over caution. What could he possibly say to justify what he'd done? What explanation could he offer that would make any difference now? 5 minutes, I agreed, holding up a hand to silence my lawyer's objection. "But here with the door open and they'll be right outside." She reluctantly agreed, following David's lawyer out of the room but positioning herself where she could see us through the glass wall. For a moment, neither of us spoke. David looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Regret, certainly, but also something else. Calculation? Rehearsal? Was he running through the speech he'd prepared, the one designed to win me back or at least mitigate his guilt? "You look good," he finally said, his voice soft. "The new place must agree with you." I remained silent, waiting. These were his 5 minutes, not mine. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. A familiar gesture that once would have made me reach out to smooth it back into place. "I fucked up. Massively, completely fucked up. I know that. And I know saying I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it." "No, it doesn't," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I never meant for it to happen," he continued, the oldest excuse in existence. "Melissa was just... It started as a work thing, then drinks, then... I don't know. I was weak. Stupid. But it didn't mean anything." 8 months of hotel rooms and secret emails didn't mean anything? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He flinched. "I deserved that. Look, I'm not trying to justify it. There's no justification. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Never. What happened with Melissa was... It was something else entirely. It wasn't about love. That's supposed to make me feel better? That you threw away our marriage for something that wasn't about love? No, Was she the only one?" I interrupted, needing to know. He hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. "Yes. You're still lying," I said quietly, the last tiny piece of my heart that had still held hope for him shattering completely. "Even now, even here, you can't tell me the truth." "Ellie, please." "Don't call me that." The nickname was too intimate, too much a part of our past together. "Your 5 minutes are up." I stood, smoothing down my suit jacket. "We're done here. The lawyers can handle the rest." "Wait." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back before he could touch me. "I made a terrible mistake, but we can work through this. Couples do it all the time. Therapy, time, whatever it takes. 5 years, Ellie. 5 years of building a life together. Are you really willing to throw that all away?" The audacity of the question stole my breath for a moment. "I'm not the one who threw it away," I said finally, looking him directly in the eye. "You did that? Every time you lied to me, every time you met her, every time you came home to me pretending nothing was wrong. You threw it away piece by piece until there was nothing left." "There's still love," he insisted. "I still love you." I never stopped. Love without faithfulness, without honesty, without respect? I shook my head. "That's not love, David. That's selfishness wearing a mask." I moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to him one last time. "I hope she was worth it. Or they were worth it. I hope whatever you got from them balances out what you lost with me. Because I would have given you everything. My whole heart, my whole life. All you had to do was be worthy of it." The look on his face, shock, pain, the dawning realization of exactly what he had destroyed, would stay with me for a long time. But as I walked out of that conference room, head high, back straight, I felt something unexpected. Not the vindication I had anticipated, but a profound sense of release. The anger wasn't gone, the pain wasn't erased, but in that moment, I reclaimed something essential that his betrayal had threatened to take from me: my sense of self-worth, my belief that I deserved better, my conviction that his choices reflected his character, not my value. Outside on the street, the spring air was crisp and clear, the city buzzing with energy around me. I took a deep breath, feeling as though I was truly filling my lungs for the first time in weeks. The world hadn't stopped because my marriage had ended. Life continued, and so would I. I texted my lawyer that I was leaving, that she could finalize whatever needed to be done without me present. Then I turned off my phone, hailed a cab, and directed the driver to a part of the city I rarely visited, a neighborhood of quirky boutiques and eclectic restaurants that had always intrigued me, but somehow never made it onto our weekend itineraries. It was time to discover what else I had missed while building my life around a man who hadn't deserved such devotion. Time to remember who I was before David, and to discover who I could become after him. The divorce proceedings dragged on longer than I'd anticipated. Despite his initial agreement to mediation, David began fighting for more of our shared assets, more time to respond to filings, more chances to talk things through, outside of legal channels. My lawyer assured me this was normal, a phase many divorcing spouses went through when they realized the reality of what was happening. "He's stalling," she explained during one of our update calls. "He thinks if he drags this out long enough, you'll get tired or lonely or broke enough to reconsider." "Not going to happen," I replied firmly, and it wasn't. Each delay, each legal maneuver only strengthened my resolve to be free of him completely. I had moved on in practical terms: new apartment, new routines, new friends through my yoga class, and a writing workshop I'd joined. But the legal ties kept me tethered to a past I was desperately trying to leave behind. 3 months after that initial mediation meeting, I received a text from an unknown number. "I miss you. Can we please just talk? No lawyers, no games. Just us." David, with yet another new phone number that I hadn't blocked yet. I deleted the message without responding and added the number to my block list. 2 days later, flowers arrived at my workplace, a lavish arrangement with a card that read simply, "I'm sorry. I'll wait as long as it takes. D." I gave the flowers to a coworker and tossed the card in the trash. The next week, a package arrived at my apartment. How he'd gotten the address, I wasn't sure, but I made a mental note to be more careful about who I shared it with. Inside was a small velvet box containing a pair of sapphire earrings I'd admired months ago while we were shopping together. The accompanying note was longer this time. "I know you probably threw away the necklace I gave you for our anniversary. I don't blame you. But I remembered how much you loved these earrings, and I wanted you to have them. No strings attached. They reminded me of your eyes, and how they light up when you're truly happy. I miss that light. I miss you. If you're ever ready to talk, I'm here. Always." David, the manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. He remembered a pair of earrings I'd admired, but hadn't remembered his wedding vows. He missed my smile, but not enough to stay faithful. I repackaged the earrings and sent them back to his office address with no note. His attempts at reconciliation continued sporadically over the next few weeks. More texts, emails sent to my personal account rather than through the lawyers, even a handwritten letter that I returned unopened. Each contact was like picking at a scab, preventing the wound from healing properly. Finally, I asked my lawyer to send a formal cease and desist letter, threatening legal action if he continued to contact me outside of official channels. It worked, at least temporarily. The direct communications stopped, and the divorce proceedings resumed their slow, methodical pace. 6 months after I'd changed the locks on our apartment, I received a call from my lawyer that changed everything. "He's agreed to the original terms," she said, a note of surprise in her voice. "All of them. No more negotiations, no more delays. He's ready to sign." "What happened?" I asked, suspicious of this sudden reversal. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "His lawyer just called and said David wants to expedite the process, get everything finalized as soon as possible. They're not even asking for the additional weekend to review the final documents." I felt a flutter of unease. This wasn't like David, to give up, to concede, to walk away from a fight. Is there a catch? Some clause I'm not seeing? No catch that I can find? The terms are exactly what we proposed in the beginning. Equal division of joint assets, you keep your retirement accounts and personal property, he keeps his. The apartment will be sold and the proceeds split. Clean, simple, fair. And he's okay with all of this? Just like that? Apparently so. His lawyer seemed as surprised as we are. "Do you want me to push back? Try to find out what prompted this change of heart?" I considered this for a moment. Did it matter why he'd suddenly decided to cooperate? The important thing was that this nightmare might finally be ending, that I could truly move forward without the weight of an unresolved marriage holding me back. No, I decided. If he's ready to sign, I'm ready to be done. How soon can we make this happen? I can have the final papers ready by tomorrow afternoon. If he signs immediately as his lawyer promised, you could be legally divorced by the end of next week. "Do it," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "Let's end this." The papers were signed without incident. David didn't request a meeting, didn't try to use the signing as an opportunity to see me or speak to me. His lawyer delivered the executed documents to mine, and just like that, the legal dismantling of our 5-year marriage was complete. I didn't realize how much the ongoing divorce had been weighing on me until it was finalized. The relief was physical, my shoulders relaxed, the perpetual knot in my stomach eased. I slept through the night for the first time in months. A week after the divorce was finalized, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with David's familiar handwriting. "It's done. You're free. I won't bother you again. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I destroyed, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Be happy, Ellie. You deserve it. D." I read the note twice, searching for the manipulation, the hidden agenda, the attempt to prompt a response. But there was none. For perhaps the first time since I'd discovered his betrayal, David seemed to be offering something genuine: acknowledgement, acceptance, and a final goodbye. I placed the note in a drawer and closed it firmly, symbolic of closing this chapter of my life. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't sure I would ever fully forgive him, but it was something close to closure. That weekend, I invited some friends over to my apartment for dinner, my first real hosting event since the separation. As we sat around my small dining table, sharing food and wine and laughter, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. There was a light in my eyes that had been missing for months, maybe longer. A spark of joy, of possibility, of life continuing despite the wounds inflicted along the way. One of my friends noticed me looking. "You okay?" she asked quietly, while the others were engaged in a spirited debate about a recent movie. "I'm getting there," I replied honestly. "One day at a time." She raised her glass in a subtle toast. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings?" I echoed, feeling the truth of it resonate within me. Later that night, after my friends had gone and I was tidying up the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text. For a moment my heart raced, thinking it might be David again, breaching his promise to leave me alone. But it was just a notification from my calendar app, reminding me of an appointment the following week. I deleted the notification with a smile, realizing that for the first time in 7 months, my first thought wasn't of him. My world no longer revolved around his actions, his betrayal, his attempts at reconciliation. I was reclaiming my story, one moment, one day, one choice at a time. The journey wasn't over. There would still be difficult days ahead, moments when the pain resurfaced, when the questions of why and how could he circled in my mind like persistent ghosts. But standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a life I was rebuilding on my own terms, I knew with absolute certainty that I would be okay. More than okay. I would be stronger, wiser, more compassionate toward myself and others because of what I had endured. Not despite the betrayal, but because of it. Because I had chosen to transform pain into growth, bitterness into wisdom, and ending into a new beginning. David's betrayal had shattered the life I thought I had, the future I had planned. But from those fragments, I was creating something new. A life that was authentically mine, not defined by someone else's choices or limitations. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I realized that the anger that had fueled me through those first terrible weeks had transformed into something else entirely. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a profound gratitude for the hard-won freedom that was now mine. The box of his belongings, the changed locks, the divorce papers, these had been acts of self-preservation, of justice, of necessary endings. But the real revenge, the true victory was this. I was whole without him. I was thriving despite his betrayal. I was creating a life so full of possibility and joy that one day his name would be nothing more than a footnote in my story rather than the defining chapter. And in that knowledge, in that quiet certainty of my own resilience, I found a peace that no act of revenge, however satisfying, could ever have provided. 3 months after my divorce was finalized, I was having lunch with a friend when she asked the question everyone seemed to be dancing around lately. "So are you dating yet?" I nearly choked on my salad. "Dating? God, no. I'm barely used to being single." She smiled sympathetically. "I get it. After Mark and I split, it took me nearly 2 years to even consider letting someone buy me dinner. But you're doing so well otherwise. New job, new apartment, you look amazing. I just wondered if you were ready to dip a toe back in." I considered her question seriously. Was I ready? The thought of trusting someone again, of making myself vulnerable, still made my stomach clench with anxiety. But at the same time, there was a small part of me that missed the connection, the companionship, the simple pleasure of sharing my life with someone who cared. "Maybe soon," I said finally. "But not yet. I think I need more time to figure out who I am now, what I want, before I try to fit someone else into the equation." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "No rush. Just know that when you're ready, there's a whole world of men out there who aren't cheating assholes." I laughed, grateful for her bluntness. "I'll keep that in mind." Later that day, walking home from work, I found myself actually considering what dating might look like in this new phase of my life. What kind of person would I be drawn to now? What qualities had become non-negotiable after my experience with David? How would I know when I was truly ready to trust again? I was so lost in these thoughts that I almost didn't notice the familiar figure exiting a cafe across the street. David, looking much as he had when we were together, well-dressed, hair perfectly styled, moving with that confident stride I used to find so attractive. But he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, her hand casually linked with his, her head tilted up as she laughed at something he'd said. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with dark curly hair and a smile that lit up her entire face. Not Melissa then. Someone new. I ducked into a doorway, irrationally afraid of being seen, though there was no reason for such caution. We were divorced. He was free to date whoever he wanted, just as I was. But something about the scene, the easy intimacy between them, the way he looked at her, struck a chord of pain I thought had healed. Was he happy? Had he moved on so completely while I was still carefully rebuilding my life brick by brick? Had all his declarations of undying love, all his desperate attempts to reconcile, been forgotten the moment he met someone new? I watched as they walked to his car, the same car we had chosen together years ago. He opened the passenger door for her, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that had once made me feel cherished. She smiled up at him as she got in, clearly charmed. Did she know about me? About Melissa? About his capacity for betrayal? Not my problem, I reminded myself firmly. Not my concern. Not my responsibility. I waited until they drove away before continuing my walk home, trying to process the unexpected encounter. The pain was there, yes, but less acute than I would have expected. More like pressing on a bruise that was mostly healed. Uncomfortable, but not debilitating. What surprised me most was the absence of anger. Seeing David with someone else didn't reignite the rage that had fueled me through the worst days of our separation. Instead, I felt something closer to pity. For him, for her, for the cycle that seemed destined to repeat itself. Because people rarely changed fundamentally, did they? The same weaknesses, the same selfishness that had led him to betray me, would likely surface again in this new relationship. And this woman, whoever she was, would eventually face the same devastating discovery I had. Or maybe not. Maybe the loss of our marriage had truly changed him. Maybe he had learned from his mistakes, had become someone capable of faithfulness and honesty. Maybe she would get the version of David that I had thought I had, the devoted partner, the honest companion, the man worthy of trust. The thought didn't bring jealousy as I might have expected, but a strange sort of closure. Whatever happened between David and this new woman was no longer my story to live or to tell. My chapter with him was finished. The book closed and returned to the shelf. By the time I reached my apartment, the encounter had settled into perspective. Seeing David with someone else was bound to happen eventually in a city where we had shared so many common spaces and connections. It was a milestone of sorts, a confirmation that life continued on its separate paths for both of us. I kicked off my shoes and moved to the living room windows, looking out at the city as twilight descended. My new apartment had quickly become a sanctuary, decorated entirely to my taste, filled with books and art and music that I loved, peaceful in a way our shared home had never quite managed to be. In the months since the divorce, I had made other changes too. A promotion at work that came with new responsibilities and challenges, a writing class that had rekindled a passion I'd set aside years ago, new friendships that supported and enriched my life in unexpected ways. I was building something meaningful from the ruins of what had been destroyed. Not replacing what was lost, but creating something entirely new, uniquely mine. My phone buzzed with a text from a colleague, an invitation to join a group for drinks after a conference we were both attending next week. Among the names was someone I'd met briefly at a work event, a man who had struck me as intelligent and genuinely kind, whose conversation had made me laugh for the first time in months. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Was I ready for this? Not a date, exactly, but a step back into the world of social possibilities, of connections that might lead somewhere unexpected. Yes, I decided, typing a quick response accepting the invitation. I was ready to be open to possibilities again, to allow new people into the life I was building. Not to replace what I had lost or to fill an emptiness, but because connection was part of what made life worth living, risks and all. I set my phone down and moved to the kitchen to start dinner, a simple pasta dish I'd perfected during my months of solo living. As I chopped vegetables and boiled water, I realized I was humming to myself, a habit that had returned gradually as happiness found its way back into my daily existence. The pasta was almost ready when a notification chimed from my laptop on the counter, a reminder that my writing class was meeting tomorrow evening. I'd been working on a short story, Fiction, but informed by my own experience of betrayal and recovery, transformed into something with broader meaning beyond my personal pain. My instructor had encouraged me to consider submitting it for publication, something I'd never have contemplated during my marriage. David had always been supportive of my writing in theory, but there had been subtle ways he'd discouraged me from pursuing it seriously. Comments about the practical challenges, gentle reminders of financial realities, the implicit message that my creative ambitions were charming, but not to be taken too seriously. Now, there was no one to discourage me, no one whose opinion mattered more than my own conviction. If I wanted to write, to submit my work, to risk rejection in pursuit of a dream, that was my choice alone. The freedom was both terrifying and exhilarating. I served myself dinner and sat at my small dining table, savoring the simple meal. Through the window, I could see lights coming on across the city, thousands of lives being lived, stories unfolding in apartments and houses just like mine. Some happy, some heartbreaking, most somewhere in between. My story was still being written, each day adding new pages to a narrative that had taken an unexpected turn but hadn't ended. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead become the catalyst for growth, for self-discovery, for a kind of courage I hadn't known I possessed. There would still be difficult days ahead, moments when the pain resurfaced, when trust seemed impossible, when the fear of being hurt again threatened to overwhelm the courage to remain open to life's possibilities. But I was stronger now, more resilient, more certain of my own worth and what I deserved from those I allowed into my heart. As I cleared away my dinner dishes, I caught sight of the calendar hanging on my refrigerator. Tomorrow would mark exactly 1 year since that perfect spring day when I'd discovered David's betrayal, when my world had shattered in an instant of devastating clarity. 1 year. It seemed both an eternity and a heartbeat. So much had changed, so much had been lost and found and transformed. I was not the same woman who had prepared that anniversary dinner with such loving care, such complete trust. That version of me was gone, replaced by someone with sharper edges, deeper wisdom, greater capacity for both pain and joy. I traced the date on the calendar with my finger, acknowledging its significance without allowing it to overwhelm me. Then I moved deliberately to my desk, opened my laptop, and began to write. Not about betrayal this time, but about renewal, about the unexpected gifts hidden within our greatest losses, about the strength we never know we possess until it becomes our only option. The anniversary would come and go, and life would continue. My story wasn't defined by what had been done to me, but by what I chose to do with it, how I transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into wisdom, an ending into a new beginning. That was the true revenge after all. Not the box of his belongings or the changed locks or even the divorce papers that set me legally free. The real victory was this, becoming a woman who could look back at what had broken her and say, "Thank you. You were the catalyst for everything I was meant to become." With that thought, I continued writing long into the night, adding my voice to the countless stories of those who had been broken and mended, who had fallen and risen, who had lost everything and found something greater in the aftermath of devastation. My story, my revenge, my triumph, my life, reclaimed, renewed, and finally truly my own. I could feel it in the air, that peculiar stillness that comes before a storm, that electric anticipation of change. Or maybe it was just spring in New York again, the season when my life had fallen apart exactly 1 year ago. Whatever it was, I woke up on that anniversary morning with a strange sense of expectation, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something significant to happen. I'd marked the date in my calendar weeks ago, not to mourn, but to acknowledge how far I'd come. April 17th, the day I discovered my husband's betrayal, the day that had broken me and ultimately remade me. I got out of bed and went through my morning routine with deliberate care. Coffee prepared exactly how I liked it, no compromising on the expensive beans anymore, yoga by the window overlooking the park, a long shower with the lavender products David had always complained were too strong. Small acts of self-care that had become ritual, armor against the occasional pangs of loneliness that still ambushed me in unguarded moments. My phone lit up with a text as I was getting dressed. My friend Sophie checking in, "Thinking of you today. Want company tonight? Wine and takeout at my place?" I smiled at her thoughtfulness. Sophie had been my rock through the divorce, alternately letting me cry on her shoulder and firmly preventing me from drunk texting David during those first raw months. She never forgot a significant date. "Thanks, but I'm okay," I typed back. "Actually have plans already. Plans with myself, but plans nonetheless. I'd decided weeks ago that I wouldn't spend this anniversary dwelling in the past. Instead, I was taking myself to a small gallery opening in Chelsea, the debut exhibition of a photographer I'd met in my writing class. His work explored themes of transformation and rebirth, subjects that resonated deeply with my own journey. Afterward, I had reservations at a restaurant I'd always wanted to try, but that David had dismissed as pretentious. A night of art, excellent food, and independence. I chose my outfit with care, a deep blue dress I'd bought during a therapeutic shopping spree after the divorce was finalized, paired with the silver earrings my mother had given me for my 30th birthday. As I fastened them, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused, studying the woman looking back at me. There were still shadows beneath my eyes, testament to nights when sleep remained elusive. But there was something else there too, a quiet confidence, a hard-won serenity that hadn't existed before. I looked solid, present. Real in a way I hadn't been during those last hollow years of my marriage, when I was unconsciously accommodating David's deceptions, contorting myself to fit into the diminishing space he allowed me. "Happy anniversary to me?" I murmured to my reflection, the words not bitter but affirming. I had survived. More than survived, I had rebuilt. My phone buzzed again as I was gathering my things to leave for work. A number I didn't recognize. For a moment, my heart stuttered. David sometimes used new numbers to try to reach me, though those attempts had become increasingly rare over the past months. Against my better judgment, I opened the message. "Is this Eleanor Anderson? This is Melissa Winters. I think we should talk." The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. Melissa, the woman whose name I'd found in those emails a year ago. The first affair I'd discovered, though apparently not the only one. David's lover who had known about me but hadn't cared enough to stay away from a married man. My immediate instinct was to delete the message, block the number, maintain the clean break I'd worked so hard to achieve. But curiosity, that same fatal curiosity that had led me to open David's laptop a year ago, made me hesitate. What could she possibly want to talk about now? The divorce was final. The damage was done. What could either of us gain from such a conversation? I set the phone down without responding and finished getting ready for work, but the message lingered in my mind like a stone in my shoe, a small but persistent irritation that I couldn't quite ignore. The investment firm where I worked as a financial analyst was only a 15-minute walk from my apartment, one of the reasons I'd fought to keep this place in the divorce despite its higher rent. The familiar routine of the morning commute helped settle my nerves. The same barista at the corner coffee shop who knew my order by heart, the newspaper vendor who always had a weather update and a smile, the doorman at my building who insisted on calling me Ms. Eleanor, despite my requests to use my first name alone. "Beautiful day, Ms. Eleanor," he said as he held the door. "Spring's finally here for real." "Seems that way, Joe," I agreed, inhaling deeply. The air did smell different today. Fresher, full of possibility. "You look nice today." "Special occasion?" I hesitated for just a moment. "Yes," I said finally. "A personal milestone." He nodded sagely. "Well, you enjoy it. You deserve some good things coming your way." His simple kindness nearly undid me. That was the thing about healing. It wasn't linear. Some days I felt invincible, completely over the trauma of David's betrayal. Other days, a small act of kindness from a near stranger could bring me to the edge of tears, reminding me of how deeply the experience had changed me. The workday passed in a blur of meetings and spreadsheets, the familiar rhythm of numbers and projections, a comforting counterpoint to the emotional undertow of the day. I'd thrown myself into my career after the separation, channeling all my hurt and anger into professional ambition. The strategy had paid off, a promotion 6 months ago, recognition from senior management, and the growing confidence that came with excelling at something that was entirely my own accomplishment. As 5 o'clock approached, my phone buzzed again. "Melissa." Again. "I understand if you don't want to talk to me, but there are things you should know, things that might help you move forward. Please consider meeting me." Move forward? I had moved forward. I'd rebuilt my entire life without David, without closure, without explanations. What could she possibly tell me now that would make any difference? Yet even as I formulated these arguments in my mind, I knew I was going to agree to meet her. Not for closure, I'd found my own version of that. Not for revenge, that phase had passed. But for information. For the missing pieces of a puzzle I'd been forced to solve without seeing the complete picture. When and where? I texted back before I could change my mind. Her response came almost immediately. Tomorrow evening? There's a quiet wine bar on Spring Street, the Cellar. 7 p.m.? I stared at the screen, already questioning my decision. Tomorrow. Not enough time to prepare emotionally, but perhaps that was better. Less time to build it up in my mind, to create scenarios and rehearse responses. I'll be there, I replied, then added, 1 hour. That's all. Thank you, came her simple response. I slipped my phone into my bag and left the office, suddenly eager for the gallery opening, for the immersion in someone else's art and vision, for the distraction from my own churning thoughts. The gallery was a small, modern space with polished concrete floors and stark white walls that made the photographs seem to float in space. James, the photographer, greeted me with genuine pleasure, introducing me to the small crowd of attendees as the writer whose critique made me completely rethink my approach to this series. I blushed at the unexpected credit. Our writing and photography group had been a casual affair, meeting weekly in the back room of a bookstore to share work and offer feedback. I'd commented on his early prints, suggesting that the narrative thread connecting them wasn't as clear as it could be. I hadn't expected him to take my words so seriously. You have an eye for story, he said, guiding me through the exhibition. You saw what I was trying to say before I fully understood it myself. The photographs were stunning. Urban landscapes captured at dawn, the moment when night reluctantly gives way to day. Each image caught that liminal space between darkness and light, the city suspended in transformation. In one particularly striking photo, a woman stood with her back to the camera, facing the rising sun, her silhouette both solid and somehow permeable, as if she too was in transition. That's my favorite, James said, noticing my prolonged study of the image. I call it becoming. It's beautiful, I murmured, the way she's both present and not quite solid, like she's still deciding what shape to take. He nodded, pleased by my interpretation. Exactly. We're all constantly becoming, aren't we? Never quite finished. The observation stayed with me as I moved through the rest of the exhibition, as I congratulated James on his success, as I walked the few blocks to the restaurant where I had my reservation. Becoming, not finished. Still in progress. It was a comforting thought. I didn't have to be completely healed yet. I didn't have to have all the answers. I was still becoming whatever version of myself would emerge from the crucible of the past year. The restaurant was everything I'd hoped, intimate without being claustrophobic, with soft lighting and a menu that made no apologies for its ambition. I ordered a glass of wine and the chef's tasting menu, determined to enjoy every moment of this solo celebration. As I sipped my wine, I found myself thinking about tomorrow's meeting with Melissa. What did I actually want from it? Not drama, I'd had enough of that to last a lifetime. Not revenge. That impulse had faded as I'd focused on rebuilding my life. Information, yes, but to what end? Perhaps it was simply about reclaiming my narrative. For too long, I'd been a character in a story where I didn't know all the plot points, where crucial scenes had happened off stage. Meeting Melissa might be a way to fill in those gaps, to understand the complete story of my marriage's end from all perspectives. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe I just wanted to see the woman who had been willing to participate in the destruction of another woman's marriage. To look her in the eye and, what? Forgive her? Judge her? Understand her? I wasn't sure, and that uncertainty followed me through dinner, through the walk home, through my bedtime routine. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I tried to prepare myself emotionally for whatever might come from tomorrow's meeting. Whatever happens, I whispered to myself in the darkness, it doesn't change how far you've come. It doesn't change who you're becoming. With that thought, I finally drifted off to sleep, dreaming of that woman in James's photograph, standing on the edge of darkness, facing the light. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. I moved through my work tasks mechanically, my mind constantly circling back to the upcoming meeting with Melissa. By the time I left the office, my nerves were stretched tight as piano wire, vibrating with tension. I went home to change, opting for an outfit that made me feel confident but not like I was trying too hard. Dark jeans, a silk blouse and a deep emerald that brought out the green in my eyes, low heels that I could walk comfortably in if I needed to make a quick exit. No jewelry except my mother's earrings again. a talisman of sorts. The cellar was exactly as the name suggested, a below-street-level wine bar with exposed brick walls, dim lighting, and secluded booths that offered privacy for quiet conversations. I arrived 15 minutes early, needing time to collect myself, to claim space in the venue before Melissa arrived. The hostess led me to a booth in the back, and I ordered a glass of Cabernet to steady my nerves. As I waited, I found myself scanning every woman who entered, wondering which one was her. Would I recognize her from the photos I'd seen in David's emails? Would she look different in person than in those intimate images that had burned themselves into my memory? At exactly 7 o'clock, a woman approached my table with the careful steps of someone who isn't entirely sure of their welcome. She was smaller than I'd imagined from the photos, petite with delicate features that made her look younger than I knew she was. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. Not at all the glamorous seductress I'd built up in my mind. "Eleanor?" she asked, her voice surprisingly deep for her frame. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak immediately. She slid into the booth across from me, her movements betraying her nervousness despite her composed expression. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," she said, placing her hands flat on the table as if to steady herself. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I replied honestly. "I'm still not certain why I'm here." She signaled to the server and ordered a glass of white wine before responding. "I've been wanting to contact you for months. Ever since I found out about everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Everything? You mean the fact that you were sleeping with my husband?" I assumed you knew that part. A flash of something, pain, embarrassment, crossed her face. "I deserve that. But no, that's not what I meant. I meant everything else. All the other women. The extent of his activities. The other women, plural? I'd suspected there had been more than just Melissa, based on the credit card statements and unexplained absences, but hearing it confirmed so casually sent a jolt through me. "How many?" The question escaped before I could consider whether I really wanted to know the answer. She looked down at her hands. "That I know of for certain? 3, including me." "But there were probably more." "3. At least 3 women while he was married to me." The number shouldn't have mattered. One affair was enough to destroy a marriage, but somehow it did. It spoke to a pattern, a deliberate choice repeated over time, not a momentary lapse. "And you're telling me this why exactly?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "To clear your conscience? To make yourself feel better about your role in destroying my marriage?" The server arrived with her wine, creating a momentary pause in our conversation. Melissa thanked her, took a sip, and then met my eyes directly for the first time. "I'm telling you because I was lied to as well," she said quietly. "Not in the same way as you, of course. I knew he was married. That's on me, and I'm not trying to absolve myself. But he told me that his marriage was essentially over, that you two were staying together for appearances while living separate lives, that you had an understanding." I couldn't help it. A bitter laugh escaped me. "An understanding? Is that what he called it?" "Our understanding was that we were monogamous, planning to start a family, and committed to each other for life. That was my understanding of our marriage." She winced. "I know that now. But at the time, he was very convincing. He had answers for everything, why he couldn't leave yet, why you two were still living together, why we had to be discreet. He made it seem like you were the villain, controlling and cold, refusing to let him go despite your marriage being dead. The portrait she painted of me, this fictional, cold, controlling wife, was so far from reality that it momentarily stunned me into silence. Was that how David had seen me? Or was it just a convenient fiction to justify his infidelity? "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked finally. "The divorce is final. It's over." "What's the point?" She took another sip of wine, seeming to gather her courage. "Because I thought you should know who he really is. And because he's engaged again." The words hit me like a physical blow. Engaged. Again. Less than a year after our divorce was finalized. The timeline suggested he must have started this relationship while we were still legally married, possibly even before our separation. "To you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. She shook her head quickly. "God, no. I ended things the moment I discovered he was lying about the state of your marriage. That was about 3 months before you found out, actually. But he moved on quickly. Her name is Allison. She works at his firm, a new associate in the legal department. They've been together about 7 months from what I can tell." 7 months, which meant their relationship had started while our divorce was still ongoing, while he was sending me desperate texts and emails begging for reconciliation, while he was sending flowers to my workplace and gifts to my apartment. "How do you know all this?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. "Are you still in contact with him?" "No," she said firmly. "But we have mutual friends. And he's not exactly subtle about his new relationship. It's all over his social media. I blocked him, but friends still occasionally mention things." I nodded, processing this information. David and I didn't share many friends. Most had chosen sides after our split, with the majority aligning with me once the reason for our divorce became known. But we'd effectively moved in different social circles since the separation, so news of his engagement wouldn't have naturally reached me. "So he's engaged to someone new," I said, working to keep my voice neutral. "That's unfortunate for her, but not really my concern anymore." Melissa leaned forward slightly. "That's just it. I think it should be your concern. Not because you should want him back or care about his personal life, but because I think he's doing to her exactly what he did to us, creating this perfect image of devotion while living a completely different reality." "What makes you say that?" I asked, curiosity overcoming my desire to remain detached. "Because he's still reaching out to other women, including me." She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it so I could see. Text messages from David, dated just 2 weeks ago, explicitly suggesting they reconnect, meet for drinks, see where things go. I stared at the messages, recognizing David's texting style, his particular turns of phrase. There was no mistaking their authenticity or their intent. "You didn't respond," I noted, seeing only his messages, not hers. "No. Like I said, I ended things completely once I realized what he was really like. But I kept the messages because, I don't know. Evidence, I guess. Proof to myself that I wasn't crazy for walking away." I understood that impulse all too well, the need for concrete evidence when your reality has been so thoroughly manipulated. "And you're showing me this because—" She put the phone away and met my eyes squarely. "Because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same betrayal, the same manipulation, the same realization that someone you trusted was living a double life. And because I've been where this Allison is now, believing in someone who isn't real." I took a long sip of my wine, trying to sort through my conflicting reactions. Part of me wanted nothing to do with this situation. I'd worked hard to disentangle myself from David's life, to stop caring about his choices or their consequences. Getting involved in warning his new fiancé seemed like a step backward, a re-engagement with a past I was trying to leave behind. But another part of me remembered all too vividly the devastation of discovering his betrayal, the ground dropping out from beneath my feet, the questioning of my own judgment and worth. Could I knowingly allow another woman to experience that if there was a chance I might prevent it? "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked finally. "That we stage some kind of intervention? Show up at her office with a PowerPoint presentation on why her fiancé is untrustworthy?" Melissa smiled slightly at the image. "Nothing so dramatic. I just thought maybe we could find a way to warn her. Help her see what she's getting into before she legally ties herself to him. Give her the information I wish someone had given me. That maybe you wish someone had given you." I did wish that. I'd spent countless hours wondering if there had been signs I'd missed, clues that might have alerted me sooner to David's infidelity. If someone had approached me with concrete evidence, would I have listened? Or would I have dismissed them as jealous, vindictive, unreliable? "I don't know," I said honestly. "This feels complicated and potentially messy." "It is," she agreed. "And I totally understand if you want no part of it. You've moved on with your life. You don't owe this woman anything." That was true. I didn't owe Allison anything. Just as no one had owed me a warning about David. And yet— "Let me think about it," I said finally. "This isn't a decision I can make on the spot." She nodded, seeming relieved that I hadn't immediately rejected the idea. "Of course. Take whatever time you need." She pulled a business card from her purse and slid it across the table. "My contact information. Call or text if you decide you want to discuss this further." I picked up the card. Melissa Winters, Interior Design Consultant, with a sleek logo and contact details. A tangible piece of this woman who had once been a shadowy figure in my imagination, the faceless other woman, who had contributed to the destruction of my marriage. "Can I ask you something?" I said, tucking the card into my bag. "Why did you get involved with him in the first place? Knowing he was married?" She didn't flinch from the question, though I could see it caused her discomfort. "Honestly, Because I was lonely and he was charming, and he made it seem like their marriage was just a formality at that point. I told myself I wasn't really breaking up anything that wasn't already broken. She shook her head. It was self-deception, of course. A way to justify doing something I knew was wrong. I'm not proud of it. Her honesty was unexpected, and reluctantly, I found myself respecting it. She wasn't making excuses or trying to portray herself as a victim. She was owning her choices while acknowledging the manipulation that had facilitated them. "Thank you for being straightforward," I said. "It's refreshing after so many lies." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's the worst part, isn't it? Not just the betrayal itself, but all the lies that surround it. The way it makes you question everything, even your own perceptions." "Exactly." I agreed, surprised by this moment of connection with someone I'd spent months hating from a distance. We finished our drinks in a silence that was no longer entirely uncomfortable, each lost in our own thoughts. When the server came by to ask if we wanted another round, I declined, suddenly eager to be alone to process this unexpected meeting and its revelations. "I should go," I said, gathering my things. "But thank you for reaching out. For telling me the truth even though you didn't have to." She nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. "It felt like the right thing to do. Too little, too late, I know, but still necessary." As I stood to leave, she added, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for my part in it, but for all of it. You didn't deserve any of it." The simple acknowledgement brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "Thank you," I managed, then turned and walked out of the wine bar into the cool evening air, my mind racing with new information and difficult questions. The walk home gave me time to think, to sort through the swirl of emotions the meeting had stirred up. Anger, yes, at David for his continued deceptions, at the unfairness of him moving on so quickly while I was still carefully rebuilding my life piece by piece. But also a strange, unexpected compassion for Melissa, who had been caught in David's web of lies just as I had been, albeit in a different way. And beneath it all, a nagging question. Did I have a responsibility to this unknown woman, Allison? Would I want to be warned if I were in her position? Or was this an opportunity to finally, completely close the door on that chapter of my life by refusing to get involved? I had no answers by the time I reached my apartment, only more questions and a growing certainty that tonight's sleep would be as elusive as last night's had been. Morning found me bleary-eyed but resolute. After a night of circular thinking, I'd reached a decision about Allison. I would not actively seek her out to warn her about David. It wasn't my responsibility to save her from her own choices, and inserting myself into her life would only keep me tethered to a past I was working hard to leave behind. But neither would I remain silent if an opportunity to speak the truth presented itself. If she ever reached out to me, if our paths crossed naturally, I would be honest about my experience. I wouldn't lie to protect David's reputation or enable his deceptions to continue unchallenged. This middle path felt right, not taking on the burden of responsibility for a stranger's relationship, but not actively participating in the conspiracy of silence that had allowed David to maintain his double life for so long. Decision made, I texted Melissa, "I've thought about it. I'm not comfortable seeking out Allison, but I won't lie if she ever contacts me. That's the best I can offer." Her response came quickly. "I understand completely. Thank you for considering it. And for meeting with me yesterday." With that exchange, I expected the matter to be closed. I would go back to my carefully reconstructed life, continue the process of healing and moving forward, and leave David and his new fiancée to whatever fate awaited them. But life rarely follows our neat plans or respects our carefully drawn boundaries. 3 weeks after my meeting with Melissa, I was working late at the office, finishing a presentation for an important client meeting the next day. Most of my colleagues had already left, the floor quiet except for the distant hum of the cleaning crew's vacuum and the soft tapping of my keyboard. When my desk phone rang, I answered absently, still focused on the spreadsheet before me. "Eleanor Martin speaking." There was a moment of silence, then a woman's voice, hesitant but determined. "Is this Eleanor Anderson? I mean Eleanor Martin now, I guess." The use of my married name immediately put me on alert. "Yes, this is Eleanor." "Who's calling, please?" Another pause. "My name is Allison Reed. I think we need to talk." My heart stuttered in my chest. Allison, David's fiancée. The woman I'd decided not to seek out, now reaching out to me. "How did you get this number?" I asked, playing for time while I gathered my thoughts. "Your company website?" she replied. "I'm sorry to call you at work." I tried to find a personal number, but you're not on social media, at least not under your name. A deliberate choice after the divorce. I'd deleted all my old accounts and started fresh with private profiles under a variation of my name, accessible only to people I explicitly approved. What can I do for you, Allison? I kept my tone neutral, professional, betraying none of the turmoil her call had initiated. I'd like to meet with you, she said directly. In person. There are things I need to ask you. About David. So here it was, the scenario I'd contemplated after meeting with Melissa. The opportunity to speak truth or to remain silent. The choice made real. May I ask why? I needed to understand her motivation, her current state of mind. Was she already suspicious? Or was this some misguided attempt by David to clear the air with his ex-wife before his new marriage? Because I found something, she said, her voice dropping slightly as if someone might overhear. Emails, messages. Things that don't make sense if what he's told me about your marriage and your divorce is true. A familiar scenario. Another woman discovering David's deceptions through carelessly guarded communications. History repeating itself with painful predictability. I see, I said carefully. And what exactly has he told you about our marriage and divorce? She hesitated. That you grew apart. That the split was mutual but you took it badly. That you had emotional problems that made the marriage impossible. Anger flared hot and bright within me. Emotional problems. The convenient narrative that placed all blame on me, that cast him as the patient, long-suffering husband who had finally given up on his unstable wife. A complete inversion of reality. I understand why you want to meet, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I'm willing to do so. But I want to be clear about something first. I will not lie to protect David's reputation or feelings. If we meet, you'll get the truth as I experienced it, not a sanitized version to make anyone comfortable. That's exactly what I want, she said quickly. The truth, no matter what it is. I wondered if she really meant that. The truth was rarely what people actually wanted when it came to infidelity and betrayal. But she sounded sincere, and more importantly, she sounded like someone standing at the same precipice I had faced a year ago, peering into the abyss of a life built on lies, desperate for solid ground. All right, I agreed. When and where would you like to meet? We arranged to meet the following evening at a quiet cafe near my apartment, neutral territory that wasn't associated with either David or our past together. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of dread and something like purpose. I hadn't sought this role, hadn't wanted to be pulled back into the vortex of David's deceptions. But now that it had found me, I knew I couldn't turn away. I left work shortly after the call, my concentration shattered, the presentation temporarily forgotten. Walking home through the early evening crowds, I found myself rehearsing what I would say to Allison, how I would present the truth without seeming bitter or vindictive, how I would help another woman see the reality of the man she was planning to marry without making it seem like I had any personal stake in their relationship's success or failure. Because I didn't, I reminded myself firmly. Whether Allison married David or left him had no practical impact on my life now. My divorce was final, my assets secured, my heart slowly healing. This wasn't about revenge or justice or even closure. It was simply about truth. The truth I wished someone had offered me before I'd walked down the aisle with a man who was incapable of fidelity or honesty. When I reached my apartment, I found myself going to the closet shelf where I'd stored a single box of items from my marriage, things I couldn't quite bring myself to throw away but didn't want visible in my new life. Photos, cards, the occasional memento that had meaning beyond my relationship with David. Among them was a manila envelope containing copies of all the evidence I'd gathered for the divorce, the emails, the credit card statements, the phone records that documented his betrayal in cold, factual detail. I had kept them not out of any desire to revisit the pain, but as insurance against ever doubting my own memory or judgment, against ever being tempted to rewrite our history in a more favorable light. Now, I spread these documents on my dining table, reviewing them with the clinical detachment that time and distance had finally afforded me. These weren't emotional triggers anymore, just evidence of a past I had survived and transcended. I selected a few key items, the most conclusive emails, the most damning financial records, and placed them in a fresh envelope. I wouldn't force these on Allison, wouldn't ambush her with raw evidence unless she asked for it, but I would have it available if she wanted verification of my account. The next day passed in a blur of work and anticipation. I found myself wondering about Allison, what she was like, how she had met David, what she had seen in him, the same charm and attentiveness that had once captivated me, the same promises of devotion and understanding. Did she believe, as I once had, that she was different, special, the woman who had finally captured his complete attention and loyalty? By the time I arrived at the cafe for our meeting, my nerves were stretched tight with tension. I chose a table in the back corner, ordered a tea I didn't really want, and waited, the envelope of evidence tucked discreetly in my bag. I recognized her the moment she walked in, though we had never met. She had a certain polished quality that David had always been drawn to: sleek dark hair, tasteful makeup, expensive but understated clothing. Beautiful in an accessible way, intelligent-looking, confident in her movements until she spotted me and hesitated, uncertainty briefly clouding her features. I raised a hand in acknowledgement, and she approached the table with the careful steps of someone crossing uncertain terrain. "Eleanor?" she asked, though she clearly knew it was me. I nodded. "Allison, please sit down." She slid into the chair across from me, setting her bag on the empty seat beside her. Up close, I could see the signs of strain around her eyes, the slightly too bright quality of her gaze that suggested recent tears or suppressed emotion. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious tension. "I know this must be uncomfortable." "It's unexpected," I agreed, "but not unwelcome. Would you like something to drink? The lavender tea is quite good here." She shook her head. "No, I don't think I could swallow anything right now, to be honest." I nodded, understanding completely. "Then let's not waste time with small talk. You found something that made you question what David told you about our marriage. What was it?" She took a deep breath, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper, placing it carefully on the table between us. "This. It fell out of a book he lent me. A letter from someone named Melissa. I didn't need to read it to know what it contained. The universe had its own sense of irony, it seemed, David undone by his own carelessness, just as he had been with me. "Have you asked him about it?" I kept my tone neutral, curious rather than leading. "Yes." Her mouth twisted in a grimace. "He said she was a former client who developed an inappropriate attachment to him, that she'd been pursuing him despite his rejections, that the letter was unwelcome and he must have stuck it in the book to hide it from me because he didn't want to upset me with another woman's advances. A plausible explanation if you wanted to believe it. If you loved someone and couldn't imagine they would deliberately deceive you. If you had built a life around their version of reality. And you didn't believe him," I observed. She met my eyes directly for the first time. I wanted to, but something felt off, so I started looking. His emails, his text messages when he was in the shower, his credit card statements. Her voice caught slightly. There were patterns, inconsistencies, things that didn't add up. The same investigation I had conducted a year ago, driven by the same suspicions, yielding the same devastating conclusions. "And what did you find?" I asked gently. "Enough to know he was lying. About Melissa. About other women." She paused, her gaze dropping to her hands, which were twisted together on the table. "About you." I waited, giving her space to continue in her own time. "He told everyone that you were emotionally unstable, that you'd had some kind of breakdown when he asked for a divorce, that you'd stalked him, harassed him, tried to ruin his reputation out of spite." She looked up, her eyes searching my face. "But that's not what happened, is it?" "No," I said simply. "That's not what happened at all." I told her then, the whole truth, without embellishment or emotional manipulation, the discovery of his affair with Melissa, the evidence of others, the methodical way I had planned my exit, changing the locks and leaving his belongings outside our apartment, the clean break I had tried to make, only to have him pursue me with flowers and gifts and promises of change, while simultaneously starting a relationship with her. She listened without interruption, her expression shifting from uncertainty to recognition to a grim sort of confirmation, as if I was simply articulating what she had already begun to suspect. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I had shared. Finally, she asked, "Do you have any of it? The evidence you found?" I nodded, reaching into my bag for the envelope I had prepared. "Copies of some of it. I brought these in case you wanted verification." She took the envelope but didn't open it immediately. "I believe you," she said quietly. "Your story matches what I've found. What I've suspected. I needed to hear it from someone else. To know I wasn't crazy or paranoid or reading too much into things. The familiar words struck a chord of recognition within me, the desperate need for external validation when your own reality has been systematically undermined. "You're not crazy," I assured her. "And you're not imagining things. David is extremely skilled at creating different versions of reality for different people, at making each woman in his life feel like she's the only one who truly understands him, who sees the real him, while he's seeing half a dozen other women on the side," she finished bitterly. "Yes." She finally opened the envelope, scanning the contents with the rapid assessment of someone who didn't need to read every word to grasp the overall picture. When she looked up again, her eyes held a new clarity, a resolved sort of pain. "I called off the engagement last night," she said, "after I found more messages on his laptop, recent ones, to women I've never heard of. To this Melissa person." She shook her head. "He denied everything? Said I was overreacting, imagining things, being hysterical and paranoid. Classic gaslighting," I noted. "Make you doubt your own perceptions rather than acknowledge his actions." "Exactly," she gave a small, humorless laugh. "The thing is, it almost worked. I almost believed him. If I hadn't found your divorce records in the public database, seen the grounds listed as adultery, I might have convinced myself I was the problem." I understood that impulse all too well, the desperate desire to believe that your relationship was salvageable, that your trusted partner wasn't systematically betraying you, the mental gymnastics required to maintain that belief in the face of mounting evidence. "What will you do now?" I asked. She straightened her shoulders slightly, a physical manifestation of resolve. "Move out. Today, actually. I have friends I can stay with until I find a new place." She hesitated, then added, "I wanted to meet you before I did it. To be absolutely sure. To hear your side before I blew up my whole life based on suspicion. And now? Now I'm sure." She handed the envelope back to me. "I don't need these. I have my own evidence. And seeing you, how composed you are, how whole. It helps somehow. To know there's life after David." I smiled at that, genuinely touched by her observation. There is definitely life after David. Better life eventually. Though I won't pretend the transition is easy. "I'm already dreading it," she admitted. The questions from friends, the sympathetic looks, the "but you seemed so perfect together" comments, the dating apps and first date small talk. "It's a process," I acknowledged. "But you're already ahead of where I was. You saw the signs earlier. You trusted your instincts. You sought verification instead of burying your suspicions." I paused, then added gently, "And you have the advantage of not being legally tied to him. A broken engagement is painful, but it's simpler than a divorce." She nodded, absorbing this perspective. "Thank you for meeting me, for being honest, for, I don't know, validating what I already knew but was afraid to fully accept." "You don't need to thank me. In your position, I would have wanted the same courtesy." I hesitated, then added, "If you need someone to talk to during the transition, someone who understands exactly what you're going through, I'm available. No pressure, just an offer." She looked surprised, then grateful. "I might take you up on that. Not to dwell on him or what happened, but just to talk to someone who gets it." We exchanged phone numbers before she left, both of us aware that we had formed an unexpected connection through our shared experience. As I watched her walk away, shoulders straight, step determined, I felt a strange sense of completion, as if some cosmic circle had been closed, some balance restored. David would continue his patterns, likely find another woman to charm and deceive. But at least these two, Melissa and Allison, had escaped his web of manipulation. And I had played a small role in that freedom, not out of vengeance or bitterness, but from a place of truth and compassion. As I walked home through the spring evening, I realized that I felt lighter somehow, unburdened in a way I hadn't expected. Not because I took pleasure in David's latest relationship failing. I was long past the point where his personal life affected my emotional state, but because I had been able to transform my painful experience into something useful, something that helped another woman avoid deeper entanglement with a man who would inevitably cause her pain. There was power in that transformation, in the alchemical process of turning personal trauma into a resource that could benefit others. Not erasing the pain or pretending it hadn't happened, but integrating it into a larger narrative of growth and connection. Back in my apartment, I took the envelope of evidence and, after a moment's consideration, dropped it into the shredder. I didn't need those physical reminders anymore. They had served their purpose, both for me and now for Allison. The past was finally, truly past, not forgotten, but no longer requiring documentation or proof. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in months, untroubled by dreams of what had been or what might have been. Whatever happened next, with Allison, with my own gradually re-emerging social life, with the writing I had begun to pursue more seriously, would be built on the foundation of truth and self-knowledge I had fought so hard to establish. The revenge I had once craved had been supplanted by something far more satisfying, the quiet triumph of reclaiming my own story, of helping another woman reclaim hers, of refusing to participate in the conspiracy of silence that allowed men like David to move from one relationship to the next, leaving damage in their wake. Sometimes the most powerful revenge wasn't about hurting the person who had hurt you. Sometimes it was about ensuring that their actions had consequences, that their patterns were recognized, that their manipulations lost their power in the clear light of shared truth. And sometimes it was simply about becoming the person you were meant to be all along, stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more authentic, despite their best efforts to diminish or define you. As spring gave way to summer, my life settled into new rhythms, work that challenged and fulfilled me, friendships that had deepened through honest vulnerability, creative pursuits that connected me to parts of myself I had neglected during my marriage, and, unexpectedly, a genuine friendship with Allison, who had indeed taken me up on my offer of support during her own recovery process. We met occasionally for coffee or walks in the park, carefully avoiding making David the center of our conversations. Instead, we talked about our careers, our hobbies, our hopes for the future. We compared notes on the strange experience of rediscovering ourselves as single women after believing our futures were set. We laughed at the absurdities of dating apps and well-meaning friends who wanted to set us up with the perfect guy. She was healing in her own way, at her own pace, as was I. Two women whose paths would never have crossed if not for the actions of a man who had underestimated both of us. On a warm July evening, as we walked through the park after dinner, Allison turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder if he knows that we're friends now?" I considered the question. Probably not. He compartmentalizes so effectively, keeps each woman in her own separate box in his mind. The idea that those boxes might open, that we might find each other, probably never occurred to him. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. There's something satisfying about that, isn't there? That the very women he tried to pit against each other ended up forming a connection he never anticipated. Poetic justice, I agreed. Though I have to say, I don't think about him much these days. He occupies less and less space in my thoughts. Same, she said. Weeks go by now where I don't think of him at all. That feels like progress. It is, I assured her. The best kind. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the lingering daylight of summer, the sounds of children playing, dogs barking, life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. "I have a date tomorrow," Allison said suddenly. "First one since." "Well, since everything. That's great," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "Anyone interesting?" "A friend of my brother's. A doctor. Very different from David. Quieter, more thoughtful, less flashy." She shrugged. "Who knows if it will go anywhere, but it feels like a step forward." "It is," I said again. "A brave one." "What about you?" she asked. "Any prospects on the horizon?" I smiled, thinking of the writing instructor from my advanced workshop who had been finding increasingly creative reasons to extend our conversations after class. His quiet intelligence, his genuine interest in my work, his complete lack of resemblance to David in any way that mattered. "Maybe," I admitted. "Nothing definite yet, but possibilities." "To possibilities, then," she said, mimicking a toast with her water bottle. "To possibilities?" I echoed, feeling the truth of it resonate within me. Because that was the ultimate revenge, wasn't it? Not the changed locks or the box of belongings left by the door, or even the divorce papers that had legally freed me from a man who had never deserved my loyalty. The true revenge was this, standing in the summer twilight, open to possibilities, heart scarred but healing, spirit bruised but unbroken, living well, moving forward, becoming the woman I was always meant to be, not defined by his betrayal or limited by his perception of me, but expanded by my own hard-won wisdom and courage. The box of his stuff, the changed locks, those had been necessary first steps, practical actions that had set my liberation in motion. But the journey hadn't ended there. It had continued through grief and anger, through rebuilding and rediscovery, through unexpected connections and new beginnings, and it would continue still, into a future I was now creating on my own terms, one choice, one day, one brave step at a time. That was my revenge. That was my victory. That was my story, no longer entwined with his, but standing complete and powerful on its own. Mine alone. Mine at last.